Hey there. Last week, I gave some hot and quick takes on AMG's new timeline events for Marvel Crisis Protocol. Today, I'm going to be giving it a more measured look while answering the 5 questions in the thumbnail. My name is Nate, and welcome to the Gamers Guild. First things first, AMG haven't done themselves any favors by establishing timelines as a way to have restricted list building for a couple of years now, to then release a format called timeline events. Since I'm going to be talking both about the timeline format and the 2024 timeline a bit, I'm going to, for this video, refer to the timeline format as simply the format, and then I'll refer to the timeline as the 2024 timeline. So with that said, let's get after the 5 questions, but slightly out of order so that it all hopefully makes a little bit more sense. First up is, what is the format and 2024 timeline really all about? The format that AMG has presented to the community is a multi-day event ranging from 2 to 3 days, depending on the number of participants, in which each player will have built 3 complete rosters with no duplication of characters, team tactic cards, crisis cards, or infinity gems. You submit which roster you want to be number 1, 2, and then 3, and then we'll rotate on a schedule which of these rosters is played during the Swiss. Then after either 3 or 6 rounds, there is a cut to the top 8 players, who then play another 3 rounds in a seeded format, where the number 1 seed will play the number 8 player, 2 play 7, and so on. So that is the proposed format. Additionally, with the release of the rules for this event, AMG gave us a new timeline for which to build rosters, specifically with the intention to be used with the new format. The 2024 timeline is one in which several affiliations are just straight up removed, along with a total 50% of the models in the game not being allowed, just about. Which, as you might suspect, has some people very excited and ruffled the feathers of others. Next up, let's go with, why would AMG make this format, or this timeline for that matter? In regards to the format, I think AMG sees that there is a community who is interested in high levels of play or competitive play within MCP, and AMG has thrown that community a challenge, really. AMG has been very outright about making sure that MCP is seen as a casual game first and foremost, which they've accomplished with OP kits and the like. They've never really condemned the competitive scene, just said that their focus was to make a game focused on the the casual and fun kind of stuff. And now we are getting a format that is geared toward the competitive community, where you have restricted list building, which alone forces interesting decisions on its own, but then layered that with the restriction of no duplication across 3 rosters and building for that, thus the challenge, especially with the more restricted timeline. Speaking of the timeline, why did AMG make this one that has cut out so many MCP models? In short, AMG have made a very interactive timeline where objective control isn't going to be an easy thing to do without interacting with your opponent a little bit more. For extracts, I feel it's safe to say that 90% of the plays that allow for a character to pick up an objective on the midline round 1 and then move away to safety aren't in the game anymore. Eyes on the Prize is not in this timeline. Angela, Storm, Amazing Spider-Man, none of these are in the format. Additionally, a lot of the Super Control objective models are not in the format. Ghost Spider, Thanos, and others are gone for there. A lot of the characters and affiliations that hit really hard out of the gate have also gone poof. Cosmic Ghost Rider, Hulk, and Black Bolt, as well. Honorable mention to Deception being gone for the super aggressive team. So I think AMG has been very intentional in crafting this format for a pretty balanced power level across several affiliations. So who is this for? I think the format itself is for the competitive community primarily. The additional list building restrictions and needing to be able to play 3 rosters, let alone 1 roster, very well is something that certainly seems geared toward the people who want that challenge. Now, anyone can be interested in it, but the format doesn't really cater to the narrative and casual players, if I had to guess. The 2024 timeline, on the other hand, can be really for anyone outside of that narrative player base, which may seem a little bit odd because AMG is pitching this as a timeline as Earth-based events where the Guardians and Black Order and Asgardians aren't really around. But at the end of the day, the exclusion of so many characters and affiliations defeats the purpose behind a lot of narrative stuff that people might be playing. Outside of that, though, I think that this is a timeline that is going to be one that's really fun to play in. It should have very interactive games battling over the secures and extracts, as opposed to some of the game plans that rely on objective domination with very few attacks. And again, the characters who might have just been too good at eliminating models being removed from the format. So while this 2024 timeline will be really cool to play with, it's not something I would encourage to run local events with or something to introduce new players to the game with. Now, if you have a large local community who wanted to do a 2024 timeline event, go for it. I'm jealous, honestly. For me, and probably for most communities out there, there are a decent bit of your player base that will just be excluded because a lot of their pieces are not going to be allowed in that format. I know one of our locals primarily plays Asgard, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Black Order, all of which are completely removed from the current timeline. Another one is all about Asgard, the X-Men, and Web Warriors, but doesn't have all of those pieces yet, and some of their key pieces are not allowed in the format. So hosting an event for this timeline at a local level can be a little bit of a feel bad because you're excluding part of your player base. So again, if you and maybe a few guys that are interested in the timeline and what it has to offer, get some games in with it at local game night. But get a pretty good read on the community before you try to host an event within those parameters. Which then leaves the two questions, when and where. And they're kind of the same question in regards to the format and timeline. When and where you can find an event running the new format / timeline. As AMG has specifically outlined it for the format, probably just at Adepticon next year. I know there are several large events that happen all over the world, but from what I understand, 3 or 4 day events are primarily something that only happens in the US. The cons that have had a large enough player base and enough days to run this event, off the top of my head, are Adepticon, LVO, Second Wind, and NashCon. Other events and venues may present themselves as the game continues to grow, and I may have also just completely outright missed somebody, another con, so if so, I apologize. But those seem like the events that are able to run it. Of those 4, I know Adepticon is running the event, as AMG has outlined it, and after reaching out to the other TOs, it doesn't sound like any of these other events are going to make their main event the new timeline format, as of right now at least, but might do something with it as a side event. The 2024 timeline itself, though, I think is a completely different story. I can see larger events using this timeline to change up the normal feel of an event, and this is something that could be done really by anyone, anywhere. You can have these big events in the UK just do a 2024 timeline restricted game without having to worry about the 3 additional rosters, the number of rounds needed, and all of that kind of stuff. But because it also can be run by anyone, anywhere, it's kind of hard to say when and where such a thing will happen. It just might kind of pop up. So pay attention to the different social medias where you might find out about events anyway. I personally am planning on having a NashCon's Friday team event use the 2024 timeline, as long as it continues to get updated with new character releases, because again, I think the format itself has a chance to be really fun and a different way to enjoy the MCP system. So that's my take on the 4 or 5 questions regarding the new format and timeline AMG have given us. Here at the end of the video, I want to give a shout out to the guild sponsors. If you are in the UK, shop at Tritex, use the code TritexGGCP5 at checkout for an extra 5% off. And if you use that on a pre-order item like X-Men, that'll save you 25% off in total. And if you are in the US, head to gamechefs.org and use the codes GamersGuild, no spaces, to save an extra 15% off of their already discounted prices, which comes out to a really good bargain on your end. And then additionally, Game Chefs is offering up a special Black Friday code for November 23rd through the 26th you can use the code GG Black Friday, again, no spaces, and it'll get you 20% off and free shipping. However, I will continue to say, if you were shopping from your own LGS, just keep supporting them and what they are doing. We all understand and appreciate that. So thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on gaming.